Welcome to another episode of Smallville Meets Krypton. Over the last several weeks, we've talked about the purpose of this podcast, and the purpose of what I'm doing here is to create a safe place where we could talk about adoption, whether it be a parent putting up a child and placing a child for adoption, parents who choose to adopt a child because of various circumstances, or the life of an adoptee. And I'm so grateful for the support, the love, and the feedback that we've received from so many of you. Today's special interview is what I believe where we get to hear from the hero of the story. I believe that Trina is the true hero, not only because she is my birth mom, and that deserves a badge of honor in and of itself, as all mothers know, but today we get to hear how the decisions that she made and the choices that she made ensured that I had the best opportunities possible. And I think that is what deserves a hero status. I hope that you enjoy this as much as I enjoyed interviewing my mom. This is really exciting. This is a very special opportunity for me and for everyone that gets to hear this and to see this. Not just because they get to hear your story, but they get to learn more about where I came from and be a part of this experience and recognize that we all have different experiences and different lives that we live, and there's so much to be grateful for. So, Mom, tell us, where were you born?
Well, I was born in Auburn, California.
Wow. Okay. Auburn,
Yep.
California. That's a
Yep.
long ways from here.
Yeah.
And how many kids are in your family?
So there are six. I had 5 siblings, so we had 6
Okay.
kids total. And
where do you land in that?
so I'm the second to the youngest.
Okay.
There were 2 girls and 4 boys.
Okay.
And I was born in Auburn, California, and then I think we lived probably most of our, my younger years, probably up until I was 4 or 5 in San Bernardino, California. So
Okay.
we lived in California quite a bit, and then started moving from there.
Did you guys spend a lot of time at the beach? What was life like in Auburn and in San
Yeah, we
Bernardino?
didn't really live by the beach because it was more northern California. So what I remember is that I believe my Aunt Janice, my dad's sister, she had a swimming pool. And I remember that specifically. I think I might have been only like 3, but there's a picture somewhere I might share with you sometime later. But my mom and dad used to say I was the hardest one to keep clothes on, so all I'd wear is my sunglasses and, run around the swimming pool. But I do remember the swimming pool, and I think my earliest memory was probably sitting on the table. I was eating like a stick of butter, so that was like, but yeah, we lived in San Bernardino in Northern California. And what I do remember too is that there was a really bad snowstorm at one point in time, and we all had to sleep in the front living room because there was this huge tree out front that was gonna, like, it was so heavy with snow it was gonna fall on our house. We were afraid of that, so I remember that specifically.
Wow.
But yeah, so I
That's
think after that we
crazy.
moved to Arizona. But
So, what was home life like at that time, at least in California?
So I was pretty young, and I think probably by the time I was 4 or 5, we moved to Arizona. We moved
Okay.
to a little town called Globe, Arizona, and it
Globe.
was
Okay.
right outside of Claypool, Arizona. And I was probably we lived there until I was about 7. And one of the coolest things I remember is that there was this little place called Copper Hills, and it was like a little restaurant and hotel place, and they sold lots of copper because there was copper mines and stuff right there.
Mm-hmm.
But one day, um, and I'm probably 6 or 7 years old. One day, John Wayne walks in, and
What?
yeah, yeah, John Wayne walked into the Copper Hills, uh, the restaurant and hotel thing, and I remember seeing him when he was like giant, and he had the great big cowboy hat on too. But it was walking distance, so we could always walk there and get our candy and walk back to our um, trailer park or whatever where we lived. But I'll never forget meeting him. So that was
That's
cool.
cool. That's really cool.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
um, what? How much do you know or are aware of your parents' history, at least back in California? Like, what? Why were they there? Did they meet there? What's the
Yeah,
connection there?
I don't really know. I do know that I think we spent a longer time in California in San Bernardino specifically, and because there was a special hospital there for my younger brother Brian.
Uh huh.
He had he was born with some birth defects, and we the San Bernardino hospital, we had to pretty much. I remember being there quite often in the elevators and stuff going in the hospital, and another funny thing is that um, in the elevator we met Sergeant Carter off of Gomer Pyle, and he was all dressed up in his uniform too. So it was like, oh
That's
my gosh, it's
awesome.
Sergeant Carter. Yeah, but Brian was in the hospital quite a long time. I think he had to have a few surgeries to get his his issues resolved
Oh
and stuff.
wow.
And then after that, we moved. But
Mm.
yeah, from there, it seemed like we moved to Arizona, and
Before you,
we stayed in Arizona about 7 years.
so and then and where did your parents meet then?
So my mom and her sister Donna actually met my dad and his brother Richard. So my dad's name was Tom, his brother's name was Richard, and they met in Butte, Montana,
Mm.
and they actually married. So sisters married brothers, which was
Uh
kind of
huh.
weird. It's not brothers marrying sisters, but it was. But they married and met in Butte, Montana, and my dad's family, his mom and dad were all from Montana. And my dad's dad was actually, he started some of the earliest mining in Montana. Like I have pictures of the little house that they lived in with the dirt floor, and
Wow.
the mine entry and stuff that my grandfather used to go work in. And it's just amazing to think of that. It wasn't that long ago, but it was a while ago. So,
Yeah. No, that's
but
crazy.
they met there, and
I have to
yeah,
tell you that when we were searching for you, the 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 mixture of your dad and his brother marrying um, the sisters, right? Is that am I,
yeah,
if I have it right? Right, that
right, yep,
process threw Meredith and Reagan both through a loop. Like, well, wait a minute, they're
yeah,
married to what? How do we
yeah,
how do we connect
yeah,
those dots? Because we kept going down the
yeah.
wrong path, and so
Well, and I think on top of that, the weird thing was is they both had the same last name,
yes, exactly,
but they weren't related.
yeah,
They weren't related.
uh huh. And
They
so
were
it was
both
like, wait
Grays,
a
but it was
minute,
like
What kind of family
This
is
is
this?
weird. Yeah, the banjo's playing. No,
That's right. So okay, so
it was
your
interesting.
parents met in Montana and got married, and then I assume moved around a little bit before they ended up in California, or
Um, yeah, I'm not sure what took them to California or brought them to California, but I know that my dad and my mother and my dad's sister, Janice, and her husband, maybe Janice and her husband had a place in California, and then my dad and mother moved us there so that we could be closer to the hospital for Brian or
right?
something.
Okay,
I don't really know exactly why all that transpired. And then I know that my dad and his brother and both of his brothers all got into underground mining after that, and mining itself, and I think that's what took them to Arizona,
okay. So then
brought us to Arizona after Colorado, after California.
you end up in you're in Globe, Arizona for a couple or few years. How long did you stay there?
About 7 years.
Okay,
So yeah,
and then from there,
so I
is
was
that when you
probably
moved to
7
Utah?
years old. So no, after we moved to Arizona, my dad was working for like cementation mine there, and he got involved with like these guys were like the best in the West. They were the best shaft sinkers, and the mining industry knew them. They'd call them, and they could sink a shaft faster and better than anybody. So there was like 6 or 8 of them they'd call on,
Uh
and
huh.
they would pack up and they would move and go sink a shaft for 6 months and pack up and move again. So
Wow.
once that process started, from Arizona, we moved to Colorado,
Wow.
and then we moved to Utah. When we moved to Utah, at that point, I was in junior high, so I was in seventh, eighth
Okay.
grade. And then that was when they came to Anaconda and started working at that mine. And then like we stayed at we lived places like 6 to 8 months. So I would start school, and I was always the new kid. Every 2 or 3 times a year, I was always the new kid.
Wow. That's worse
So
than a
we went
military brat.
Arizona. Yeah, it was way
Yeah.
worse. So Colorado, Utah, Wyoming. Um, then we went to Washington, Spokane, Washington. We went clear to Virginia. We went to Alabama. We went back to at some point I went back to Colorado and was living with my sister. I think when we moved to Alabama, actually when we moved to Virginia, we moved to Bristol,
Mm-hmm.
Virginia, and that's when my parents
Oh, okay.
divorced. So I was probably, I want to say maybe
Uh huh.
12,
Okay.
13. And my parents divorced right around then. So I didn't see my mother very often.
What
And
was that
it was
like?
mostly my father.
That divorce for you?
Yeah. Well, it was always like, as I remember starting in Arizona, my mother had a horrible alcoholism
Mm.
disease. So she was just plagued with
Mm-hmm.
alcoholism. And, you know, um, so she was never really there for us. So it was always, I had a really close relationship with my dad, and I was, pretty much daddy's girl. And my older brother and sister, Michelle and Tom, they were kind of wild childs, and Tracy and Jeff, my other brothers, they hung together. So they were always pals. And then Brian and I were always left, we were always
Uh
at
huh.
home. So when we went to Virginia, Michelle, my sister, had met her husband at the time, and he was much older than her. He was actually my dad's age
Wow.
almost, I think. And she was living in Colorado with him and got married. And um, my older brother, Tom, he kind of lived with us and didn't live with us. And I didn't know it at the time, but now as I talk to my sister, he had quite a few issues, just I think he was into it was the 60s
Mm.
and 70s into the
Mm-hmm.
drugs and that sort of thing. So anyway, so when we went to Virginia, it was basically me and my younger brother Brian living with my dad, and my mother would come and go. So occasionally she'd pop in, and I mean, it's crazy, but one time she came home and she, I mean, I don't know if I should tell the story or not, but it is what it is. It's just, she came home and she'd been on a
Uh-huh.
drunk and she would go do crazy stuff. Like, she came home and she always wore cowboy
Uh-huh.
boots. And she came home and she said she got hit by a semi, and she was probably hitchhiking and she got hit by a semi, and her foot was broken and it was swelled up in her
Oh my
boot.
gosh.
And
It's crazy.
I know, so she came home and my dad's like, what the heck? And so they started arguing, and I went outside with my older brother Tom because I was scared. I'm like, oh, what's going to happen? And she wanted, all she needed and wanted was some
Uh-huh.
alcohol, and she's like, I need some
Just to numb
alcohol.
the
And
pain.
she got a hold of my dad's shotgun, and she's like, put the gun here, and she's like, if you don't give me some alcohol, I'm going to blow my head off. And
Wow.
I was scared to
Of
death. I just
course.
remember being scared to death outside with my brother, and I heard the gun go off, and I thought, oh my gosh, something
Oh
horrible has happened,
man.
and my dad had just luckily pulled it away from her,
So
and
she tried. She
I was like,
tried.
woman, yeah, she pulled the
Wow.
trigger. She pulled the trigger. She was amazing. Like, it's not, I don't know how she lived as long as she did because of the things that she actually got into, but it was just alcoholism. She just needed help. And I remember her struggling all the time. She just tried and tried to be sober and just
Yeah.
couldn't do
It
it.
just
So anyway, when we moved to Virginia, they divorced and my dad had met somebody else. He met my stepmother, and
what's her name?
she was like, her name was
Judy.
Judy.
Right.
And Judy come in the picture, and she had
I
three
have some
children.
choice words for Judy, but we'll get to that
Um,
later.
yeah, yeah. So Judy was Judy had a daughter the same age as me. She had a son. Actually, she had three sons. One was older than me and two
Oh,
younger. But Judy was very she was scary and vicious, and so I'm like, I'm going to live with my sister. So I went to live with my sister Michelle in
okay.
Colorado, and got out of that. I'm like, I was like, I want to go stay with Shelly for the
You
summer.
mentioned
I
that
was like, okay.
Shelly and Tom were a little bit into the wild stuff, but what was your relationship like with them? It seems like you had a
Mm.
pretty good relationship with them, even though they were crazy.
Yeah. So while I was living with my sister in Colorado, Tom was working here in Tooele, actually, still with
Mm-hmm.
Anaconda, and he was working with some of the seasoned miners that my dad
Mm-hmm.
had worked with, and it was weird because Tom and I had a relationship that was kind of unique, but he always kind of, I knew he cared for me, and he'd always call and reach out to me. And like right before he died, 2 weeks before he died, he did call me at my sister's house and we talked. And it was just kind of weird because I was like, oh my gosh, I just
Uh-huh.
talked to him,
Yeah.
and then, yeah, when he was 21, he was in a mining accident here in Anaconda and Tooele, and
And wasn't that
it
yeah,
turned
it was
fatal,
fatal
but
only because of
it wasn't
or
the
because they
accident
were
that killed
neglect,
him.
right?
Yeah, right, right. And I think, it was a settlement of like five or
Oh
six
god.
thousand dollars, which is ridiculous. It's like
Remind
ridiculous.
me what
So,
that neglect was. I'm trying to remember.
but
You explained it once, but I can't remember what it was. What they did that ended up killing him.
oh, so he had a broken jaw and a
That
broken
was it.
foot, and basically, yep, he was in Holy Cross Hospital, and he basically choked on his own blood, and they never changed his clothing. Like 3 days later, he was still in his diggers, his
Wow.
work clothing, and we're like, what's going on here? But gosh, we're talking back in
Yeah. Yeah.
'76. So, I mean, a lot's
Right.
changed and a lot happens, but who knows what the circumstances then were too. And In reality, I don't know. His girlfriend, his fiance was with him too,
So,
and
oh,
who
at what
knows what
age?
she
What age
was
were you
doing.
when Tom died?
I was, so I want to say I was probably
So at
13,
13 years old,
maybe. Yeah,
you've
13, maybe
got
14.
your parents basically
Mm-hmm.
divorced, if not divorced, getting close to.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a brother who
Oh, yeah.
dies. You've got a mom who almost commits suicide over getting a drink, and you've
Just one
moved
of
more
many
times than
things.
most people do in a lifetime, and had to start over
Yeah.
with new classmates and new environments like that so many times, and you're 12, 13 years old. That's pretty impressive, Mom. That's a pretty big deal.
You just, I know, it's like you wonder like where you drum up the
Yeah.
resilience. Yeah, but you just have to drum it up, and it's like you just got to be tough. And I felt myself like I always had that urgency in myself that I wanted to be different. I wanted to make something in my life. I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
do something, different, because I felt like what was happening was not going to be the
Yeah.
path that I wanted. It was,
So
you
you
know,
you're
so I drove
yeah.
myself to
Well,
do
and
things,
I
you
think
know.
that's so clear in so many ways, and I think a lot of people recognize that. And I've had people even ask me, like, you need to ask her, like, where does she get her resilience, because she's been through so much, and yet she still just kind of pushes back into the world, is like, come on, I'll take this, let's go, and that's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Um, and that some of the decisions that the decisions you've had to make that are so beyond your years, uh, it's a testament to your
Yeah.
resilience and a testament to your of what you've been through. But um, so you're living in Colorado with Shelly and her husband, um, and
Hmm.
how long did you stay there with them? Where in Colorado, in fact, were you at?
So I was 13 because I remember my sister Michelle Shelley. We worked in Snowmass,
Okay,
Colorado,
Aspen.
in Aspen, and she had a contract cleaning private homes, and I worked for her making like $13 an hour under the table, which
Wow,
was
at
absolutely
13
great
back then,
money
that's
for
that's
a
impressive.
person my age. Yeah, yeah, yep. So we got up and went to work every day, um, and I went to school too. I made myself go to school because
God,
uh, all the things that were coming at me was like, I didn't have to go to
yeah.
school if I didn't want to. I could stay home and party all night or all day if I wanted, but I was like,
Why
I'm
did
going
you
to
make that
school.
decision?
But
Was it because of all the things you saw around you, or
I don't know. I just knew something inside me. Something just drove me to say, you have to go to school. And if you don't finish school, school was a big deal to me and I think part of it was because my dad always gave me praise about school and how proud he was that I would talk to him about things that I learned at school and about things that I knew. And he always made me feel really good and how impressed he was. And so that made me feel more driven
uh-huh.
to do good, and to learn
Wow.
and be better. And so, anyway, so I was like 13 and working. My sister, like I said, she had married Warren, her husband at the time, and they had a baby. And 3 months later, Warren got shot and killed out of the
Whoa.
blue. It was a freak accident. Yeah. So he was walking down the river right there by the KOA, and some guy across the river was in a trailer, said he thought
Oh
he was a
my
deer, and he
gosh.
shot him dead. So she's
Yeah.
got a 3-month-old baby, and that husband, he had actually 6 boys
Whoa.
from previous marriage. Like I said, some of
Yeah,
her sons were
because this
older than
guy she
her
married was like
because
your dad's age, right?
it was kind of bizarre.
Warren
But
was like almost your dad's age.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, that was very traumatic. And then, um, so I was compelled to stay with her even more
Mm-hmm.
so to help her and support her. And it was a harsh time, to go through that. And then,
Wow.
um, after we left Colorado, she decided to pack up and get out of there and just move we moved to Bear Lake, to Garden City, Utah.
All right.
And so it was her and
Garden
I and
City.
Jessica, her little girl, 3 years old.
Wow. So
Probably two,
you're
maybe.
you're helping raise a baby because your uncle was shot and killed, and um, and now it's time to move again, and you're now coming back to Utah. This is your first time at Garden City, though, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. And
yeah.
you you come to Garden City and um, still living with Shelly, not living with your dad yet, right?
No, no.
Okay.
My dad was in Alabama now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was Garden City like for you?
So Garden City, we were in the midst of winter,
Uh huh.
and it was so harsh. It was one of the harshest winters, and I want to say it was 19. Oh gosh, what was it? 1980.
Mm-hmm.
It was like the harshest winter ever. Like it snowed and snowed and snowed, and we lived in this house that there were two houses, and they're still there in Garden City, and they look exactly like, one's yellow, one's blue.
Uh huh.
And we lived in the one on the right, and everything just froze up. So we were like, oh my gosh, we're down there with little space heaters trying to thaw out,
Oh wow.
pipes and stuff. But
I think that's the
she was
same year
dating
that
it.
the thaw either came on fast or something, and it flooded Salt Lake and even Grantsville and Twill. Like Grantsville's
Yeah,
reservoir burst, and
yeah,
much of the city or town became like a river, and all that kind of
it
stuff.
was
Was that same year?
nuts. Yeah.
Wow.
So she was dating another guy, George, at the time, and
Uh
George
huh.
worked in the mines in Evanston, and so we had met some people in Garden City. There was Gretchen and Harry Carpenter, and George had met some friends, Dave Long, and um, some other guy named, I can't remember. I want to say his name was Stretch or something, but these guys all hung around, and that's all we had to do was get together and party, and
Uh huh.
because it was just horrible, horrible winter, and it was a major winter storm all the time. It seemed like, but I
What
rarely
was
went to school, but
Yeah, because you
I
couldn't
was
probably
going to school.
get out of your
Yeah,
house.
yeah. I mean, when I did go to school, I remember going down and um, I remember going downstairs and catching the bus out front. But half the time it was so wintry, I'm like, I'm not going to school. And
Huh.
it was K through 12 in one building in that school in Lake Town.
Oh
I
wow.
was like, oh my gosh, yeah.
Now, were you still trying to work at this point, or were you just kind of focusing on school and helping raise
No,
this baby?
yeah, I was just living with my sister and Jessica, the baby, and
Uh huh.
going to school, and it was like just getting through every day. And
Uh huh.
we knew it was going to be nice because summer was coming, and it was a beautiful place in the summertime, but we were just trying to get through this winter, and that was that.
So you make it through
But
the winter of '80 and into maybe '81, and then what's is it everything you'd hope for in Garden City, or when it finally thaws out and gets nice, or
yeah, yeah, so that winter actually is when I met Dave, your dad.
okay? And how did you two meet?
And
You said that he was
so
just
we
kind of part of a
met.
crew or running or a bunch of people that kind
Yep,
of hung around
yep, yep.
your
They all
sister.
came around. There was a bunch of them that all hung out. We all hung out together, and we'd have Christmas parties and kind of get together on the weekends and drink or whatever and
Mm-hmm.
party. And
Yeah, because
anyway, so I
I mean,
met Dave
you were
and
ready to drink. I mean, what you were, what, 13, 14?
I was a seasoned drinker by then. I was 14,
That's
15.
right.
Yeah. I was like,
You know how to
oh
hold it. It's
gosh.
fine.
I know. Well, after living in Colorado, it was like, gosh, this is nothing. It's amazing how I even survived that. So, so I met Dave, and I think we just, because um, we just got along. We just clicked and liked each other. And then, he's like, I remember him asking my sister if it's okay if we hung out, and she's like, I don't care, and it's like, whatever. Yeah. So I went along with it, and we hung out for probably, I don't know, it was probably at least a month or two.
Uh
And,
huh.
and he was working off and on at the mine. So he'd go back to Evanston and go to work. But I think it was so snowy during that particular time that, nobody went anywhere because it was just, everything was just locked in
Uh
with
huh.
snow and everything.
And
But,
we don't know where Dave comes from or anything like that.
no, and he had a girlfriend, Melinda,
Ooh,
and
you were the other one,
which
huh?
she had left. So she had left the picture and went, I think she went back to
Oh,
California.
okay.
They had broken up and went back to California or whatever. And then, of course, he sees me as some young chick that whatever, I was vulnerable or whatever. And so it is what it
Uh
is.
huh.
Um, and then, lo and behold, like a couple months later, I'm like, remember telling my sister, I think I'm pregnant.
Okay, so let's back up just a little
And
bit. We don't want to. We don't
yeah,
have to go into the details of that process, but I'm
right.
there's so many questions around that I haven't asked, and I'm just curious about. So, you you like, did you take a test first, or did you just miss and you realize, oh, I think I'm pregnant, or what? How did you find out you were pregnant?
I was sick right off the bat. I was sick.
Oh, okay. So
I
you
just
were
knew it. I
sick
was
from
sick. I
the
was
get
like,
go.
oh my God, I'm sick and something's not right. And like, I knew it, I just knew it. I'm like, this is it.
So what did you think at that point? Like, oh shoot.
I think a lot of things went through my head. And you know, you think this is horrible, or this is, what is this going, what's going to happen? What's he going to say? How's he going to react? How's my family going to react? I think I kept it in for some time, and then
You did, okay.
decided,
Who
what I came to
and you said it was
my conclusion was that, um, my conclusion was that, I wanted to tell my dad, and go home, and my dad would make it all better, and things would be okay.